Now we're going to take a look at the inside. And before we do so, I've put on my anti-static smock and my wrist strap, and it's properly grounded. Anytime you're working with electronic devices, you have the potential to discharge static electricity in them, which will damage or destroy them. So you always need to take anti-static precautions when you have access to electronics. So since I'm opening this up and there's connectors I can touch to go straight into chips, I have the potential to blow up those chips. I'm wearing my protective gear. Let's see if I can. All right. So once you take the two screws out, the top panel can be held on with a Kensington lock. Once you take the top screws out, slide it back a little bit, it just lifts off. There's two cooling fans in it, and it has a docking connector. It has a little spring-loaded docking connector there. Of course, I've now got some body oils on that connector, so I'll clean it off. And then in here, you can see the docking connector back there. Right here's a docking gold fingers that it's hitting. So now we've got the cooling solution out. We'll move that out of the way. The side panel just lifts off. There's a little bit of a binding right here. Not too bad. It was a #1 Phillips head to take the screws out. The top lifts up, or the sides lift up a little bit and just come out. All right, so there's the side panel. The side panel on the other side lifts off similarly, pretty easily. I'll make sure I face this toward each other so we don't scratch anything. All right, and there is, as you can see, pretty easy access. We have our power connector for the video board, the GPU. There's our power supply. This is an FSP 500 watt power supply. There is the backplane. The backplane is a product that the Intel NUC division calls West Cove. And then you can see there's some various other cabling. Now, when we were working with the Ghost, we like to take this panel off to give us easier access to everything. I'm going to actually see if I can access things without doing that. And I'm actually going to show you some other stuff. So there is a little locking tab here, a little clip that holds the cable harness. You don't have to actually cut it or break it. And then at that point, the video cable harness comes out. And so now, a little bit easier to see, there is a 4-lane PCI Express slot, and there is a 16-lane PCI Express slot. And so you can plug cards into both of these slots, or you can plug a double wide card, graphics card into the blue connector, and then you can use the various power connectors as needed for your video card. So we have the 8-pin, and we have the alternate 6-pin with the 2 pins that stack. And so given whichever video card that you have, you may need a different power cable setup, and that's what this is here for. So you get a little bit better look at the West Cove base plane board. This board basically has 2 big slots, one for the NUC element and one for the graphics card, and then a 4-lane card. And there is an SSD. You can kind of see below this plastic, you can see a little bit of ribbing in there, and that is from the cooler that's on an SSD. And I'm going to show that. I might not tear this one apart because I already have a Ghost that's all torn apart. But I do want to show, as you can see here, these are the sockets, M.2 sockets. You can have 2 SSDs in here. One is a 2280, and the other one takes a 2280 or a 22110. And we will be looking at that. Taking the module out, the element, is rather difficult. It's not just plugged in. As you can see, here's our Wi-Fi radio connections. There's a cable here and a cable here, another cable here. There's a cable down here. There's another cable hiding behind this plastic. And so getting the NUC element out is rather challenging. and easy to break or damage parts. So I would definitely recommend that you leave that to the experts at Simply NUC to configure your NUC element. So what Simply NUC will do is configure the element and test it, and then we'll warranty it when we assemble it for you, and then provide you with support. So we're going to take a look at the pieces now. I'm actually going to set this one aside. And what I have is the i9. Now, as you probably saw on that one, it has a Xeon processor. And you can see this has a Core i9, 9th gen chip. And you can see the cabling may not be exactly the same between the two units, but you can see the cooling fan for the processor plugs it here. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 connectors on here. I think 7 of them have cables plugged into them inside the chassis. And so getting to all these cables is rather challenging. Making sure you get them all plugged back in correctly, there's lots of issues with that. So we recommend that you leave it alone. Let Simply NUC do the work for you. Now, this is a prototype. Trying to see. It looks like what this is the radio module. Since this is my prototype, I'm going to peel the stuff off. I'm pretty sure that what's under here is my radio. So we're actually going to take a look. What is under the mysterious black tape? And there is, dum-pa-da-bum, a radio module with the 2 coax cables plugged in. So the gray one is coming here to convert it to a bigger. These connectors are very delicate and they break pretty easily. So Intel has converted it to a more standard larger connector. These are typically used in video or even oscilloscope connections because they're rugged. They're a lot harder to damage. And then the second one comes over here and docks and goes here. Looking at the back, we have the stiffener for the cooling solution. We have a couple of power supplies, but that's the back of the board. We are going to take this thing apart and take a look at the inside next. All right, I wanted to show you, this is my Ghost Canyon, which is a prototype, just all these cables. So the element, so with the element card in there, there is a cable that goes down. There's lots of cables. There's a power cable, there's a front panel cable, there is the fan docking cable, there are the antenna cables, and then there is this cable that comes over here. Probably this is the USB for the front panel. And so as you can see, there's just a variety of cabling. We really don't recommend that you try to build your element yourself. I know some do-it-yourselfers will really want to get in here. It's really not as serviceable as you might think it is, and it'd be best to just go to simplynuc.com, choose the model you want in the configuration, and then it'll get built up professionally in an anti-static environment and come with a support warranty. So there is another M.2 slot in there. This M.2 slot is also 2242, 2280, or 22110, and it has a little heatsink cooler. And you can see that I've got a special Intel 380 gig Optane module in here, and hopefully we can explain what that's for with the product launch. I don't have it working yet, but it's not storage. It's used for something else. And so let's see. There's that docking board for the fans, the cooler assembly that goes on top. This is the power button and illumination, front panel. And then there's another board here. So this is the SD card slot, perhaps. So there's a lot of things crammed in here. The Wi-Fi antennas are along the top here. You can actually see one of the Wi-Fi antennas right there. The other one, I'm not seeing, but it's probably right here. So your Wi-Fi antennas are behind the plastic pieces. So that is the Ghost Canyon. And the chassis is the same as the Quartz Canyon. The only difference, again, being the color it's painted and the side panel has a skull or not. All right, we're ready to open up the element itself. And you can see it's a large blower. And then we have our two thermal pads for the two SSDs, a 2280 and up to a 22110. And so there's the blower cooler assembly. All right, we'll get that out of the way. And then we'll take a quick look. We've got memory in here because this actually was a board that was being tested. The processor is under here. This one is a Core i9. An i9, Core i9, 9th gen processor, and there's the spring screws applying the correct pressure to the processor die. The FETs are actually getting hit as well. So the power supply FETs are being cooled as well. That's something that you kind of see on high-end motherboards. We've got the two DIMM sockets here. So the blower pulls air from around everything, and then this copper heatsink brings all the processor's heat up to this huge cooling fins, as you can see through them. And then the blower pulls air from the cavity and blows it across to cool this, but that airflow directly cools the DIMMs and the SSDs. You can see the battery is easy to get to in it. And then the SSD, the primary SSD, 2242 or 2280, and this supports PCI Express and SATA. And then the second one is 2242, 2280, or 22110. And that one is PCI Express. I'll have to check the specs. We'll have some specs up on whether the second socket supports SATA. I would expect with this product you're not going to be putting SATA SSDs in it, though Simply NUC does have high performance SATA SSDs as a good starting place for good economical choice. There is evidently a jumper somewhere because there's a table of what the jumper settings mean. Probably these jumpers here. And so again, you can see all of the connectors. Now, I'm not going to tear this thing apart, but we'll try to look in there. So there is, the audio panel. So the audio panel is on a little riser. So it's not plugged in the board. It's screwed into a standoff post, and there's a ribbon cable bringing it over here. So this is your audio connector going to the Toslink audio connector. The HDMI is a right angle. We've got the two USB 3.1 Gen 2 stacked with gigabit Ethernets. And I would venture to say that the magnetics are built into the connectors for the Ethernet ports. Now, the difference between this is the Core i9. The only difference in this motherboard to the Ghost Canyon motherboards is this is a vPro motherboard, and as such, it also has TPM 2.0 on it, and it has an AMT capable Ethernet ports and the radio. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mention the specs on the radio. This is a Wi-Fi 6. We've had the 802.11a and B and G and N and AX and AC and all of these nomenclatures. So the industry has decided to simplify it, and starting with the previous generation of Wi-Fi 802.11ac plus Bluetooth, that was going to be called Wi-Fi 5. This one's Wi-Fi 6. And so this has an 802.11ax radio, which also does AC and B, G, and N. And so all of your specs are covered. And this is what we call the really high speed. Plus it supports additional security, and it is Bluetooth 5.0. The antennas are actually in the chassis, which I might tear apart and show you. I'm going to go ahead and take the DIMMs out so you can see what's under the DIMMs. And so you can see there's really nothing that traces from the backplane to the processor socket, and the DIMM probably wiring is in there. So I'm not sure that there's any value of tearing this apart further. The SSDs that are placed here can be rated in hardware. So both of these sockets are driven by the quote south bridge and are through the RST functionality of the south bridge. And so they can be rated outside of the OS. And of course, the OS also supports rating. I don't know that there's anything more to see about this. This is the i9. The Quartz Canyon has a Xeon. Now there is a difference. I think this tape was not for these parts. It's just to hold the antenna cable in place. So the difference between Ghost Canyon and Quartz Canyon, the i5, i7, and i9 do not have vPro. They do not have TPM. There is also a there is an i7 and Xeon core. As you can see, this is the Xeon. All right. So for vPro, for the true Quartz, while Simply NUC can put the i5, i7, i9 into this chassis, which is identical other than the skull paintings, or we can remove the skull paintings in effect. The Xeon is ECC. And so the memory for the Xeon must be ECC memory, so it's a little bit more expensive. Simply NUC will have some options for you to go. We go up to 64 gig of DRAM, and what I'm going to call DRAM buffer, just as a teaser to what's coming, because Simply NUC is working on another feature that we don't know that anyone else is working on, but we'll be offering it hopefully at launch time. For the production units, we minimize the amount of touching that we do to them. They're disassembled for the production line. They're built up to spec. They are put back together. They're tested, and then their OS is loaded. The latest BIOS is put on. The latest HDMI firmware. Several of the firmware chips are updated, all on the production line. They get a functional test. Every NUC that goes through Simply NUC is fully tested. I'm sorry, I should say it differently. Every NUC that goes through Simply NUC is tested for operation. We don't plug connectors into every port. We assume that because of the volume of computers made, that everything's working. But they're all tested, that the OS boots, that it does see the full complement of memory, the full amount of SSD space, that the OS is updated and loaded, and so on. So that you can have confidence that when you purchase from Simply NUC and you turn it on, it's going to come up and work. And then if you have issues, that we have a world-class support team ready to help you out, so that you know about what to expect. Our website should be live, and you should be able to go over there and configure. On the Ghost Canyon i9 prototype that Intel sent to Simply NUC, one of our performance testers, he's a gamer that does high-end performance testing, told us that the unit he would, when he ran, I think it was pass marks on it, it placed it as in the top 1% of the fastest computer or fastest desktop PCs. Now, there's lots and lots and lots of systems that have been tested, tens of thousands. And so it might be the 400th fastest computer, desktop PC, to be in that top 1%. But he was very pleased with the performance of the i9. The Xeon is not going to give you better gaming performance. If you're looking for gaming, you will want the i9 or the i7. If you're looking for a workstation or for a rendering engine, then you're going to want to go with the i7 vPro or the Xeon. In particular, you're probably going to want to go with the Xeon processor if you're doing high-end video rendering, editing, anything that requires a lot of computing power. You're going to get that out of this. Now, the way this is set up, the Intel processor has 3 display controllers built into it. And so without plugging any cards in, you can still access the 3 video controllers inside the display controllers, 1 through the HDMI and 2 through the alternate DP, or you can use an alternate DP to daisy chain to all 3 monitors or any combination thereof. So without a video card in this, you still have decent video performance. It's low-end gaming, low to mid-range gaming, nothing to really write home about. But then you can plug in a graphics card, and these are now being called ITX graphics cards. And Simply NUC will have an offering of good, better, best for the gaming market and for the workstation market. And for the workstation market, we'll have a single slot graphics card, or maybe a couple of single slot graphics card options, so that into the other one we can plug like a 10 gigabit Ethernet port or video capture and so on. And in some of these, we can actually plug in a couple of capture cards and capture video from a multitude of sources. So I hope I've answered a lot of queries about what's here. We're going to talk about the specs a little bit. It has 2 Intel gigabit Ethernet ports. It has Wi-Fi 6, which is the AX200 module. It has 4 USB 3.1 Gen 2 connectors. It has 7.1 digital audio on either the HDMI or the display port ports. It has a 3.5 millimeter rear speak Toslink combo jack. The internal front panel audio brings out the microphone and headset. It does have KEC, so if the HDMI connector is plugged into a TV set, the unit can turn on or off the TV set with the KEC control. All right, post any questions below, and the manager that manages our social media will ask me to come on and answer, so I can answer technical questions. We have done performance testings. We have a series of different graphics cards that fit into the chassis, and so I'm really excited about this product being a very small form factor, high performance system. I'm not sure that you're going to find any system in the world, PC compatible system in the world, that is 5 liters, that has this much performance at a very aggressive price point. So even though I'm shooting this video a few weeks before CES, the web pages are being set up, all the pricing is being set up, and when they announce the product at CES, all of the pricing should be up on the website. All right. That is a lot of information. I told you that we would tear this thing apart and we would look at it. So I hope I've satisfied your curiosity of what's under the hood and what's under the panels, and you've gotten a really good look at this product today. So thank you very much.